The courtroom was hushed, the air so heavy it seemed to press against every chest in the room. At the center sat a young black mother, her eyes fixed on the ground, while lawyers whispered strategies and jurors shifted uncomfortably in their seats. But the silence shattered when the courtroom doors creaked open. In walked a boy, only 8 years old, clutching a worn notebook to his chest. Gasps rippled through the crowd. He wasn't just here to watch. He was here to defend his mother, a woman accused of something she hadn't done. And what happened next left even the judge speechless. It began months earlier in a quiet southern town, where race still casts long shadows over everyday life. Angela, a hard-working black single mother, juggled 2 jobs to keep food on the table for her son, Marcus. Though only 8, Marcus carried himself with unusual seriousness, an old soul in a child's body. He spent hours at the library while his mom worked late shifts, losing himself in books about history, civil rights, and even law. Life wasn't easy. Angela's small apartment sat in a neighborhood often ignored by city officials. Broken streetlights, cracked sidewalks, and a constant hum of sirens in the distance. Still, she raised Marcus with love and integrity, teaching him that knowledge and dignity were weapons against prejudice. But one evening changed everything. After a dispute with her landlord, an influential white man in the town, Angela found herself accused of theft and property damage. It was a setup, but in a system where truth often bent to power, her voice carried little weight. The landlord had friends in high places, and suddenly Angela was staring down criminal charges that threatened her freedom. Marcus watched his mother break down that night, whispering prayers while holding him close. And in that moment, something inside him hardened. He would not let the system swallow her whole. He didn't know how, but he would find a way. When the trial date came, Angela stood alone, her court-appointed attorney indifferent and unprepared. What no one expected was that Marcus had been preparing too, scribbling notes, memorizing laws, and studying cases late into the night. He wasn't just a child anymore. He was a son on a mission. The courthouse loomed like a fortress, its stone walls stained with decades of history, some noble, much of it shameful. Inside, whispers filled the hallways as Angela walked past, flanked by officers. Some eyes followed with pity, others with judgment. Marcus sat quietly on the wooden bench, his small feet unable to touch the floor. He clutched the notebook that had become his lifeline. Each page was filled with meticulous handwriting, definitions, case references, even questions he thought the judge should ask but wouldn't. The trial began, and the prosecutor wasted no time painting Angela as irresponsible and dishonest. He spoke confidently, weaving a narrative of a desperate woman who lashed out when she couldn't pay her rent. The jurors nodded, some folding their arms, others scribbling notes. Angela's lawyer barely objected, flipping through papers without conviction. Marcus's stomach churned. He could see his mother shrinking under the weight of accusations. Every word felt like a stone hurled at her dignity. But then came a moment, a slip. The landlord testified, claiming Angela had stormed into his office on a Friday evening to demand repairs, which allegedly ended in damage to his property. Marcus's eyes widened. He remembered reading in her mom's work schedule that she had been working a double shift that exact evening. She couldn't have been there. His small hand tightened around the notebook. Details like this, truths buried beneath lies, were what he lived for. He knew adults dismissed him as just a kid, but he also knew facts didn't care about age. When recess came, Marcus approached his mother, his voice low but firm. He told her about the inconsistency, pointing to his notes. Angela looked at him, torn between pride and fear. Could the words of an 8-year-old really change anything? The next session began, and something unexpected happened. Marcus rose from his seat and walked to the front. The entire courtroom froze. Gasps filled the air. Judges weren't accustomed to children stepping into the arena of law. But Marcus spoke, not with arrogance, but with clarity. He requested to present evidence on behalf of his mother. The judge hesitated, then curiosity overcoming tradition allowed it. The room fell into a silence so profound that even the hum of the fluorescent light seemed to vanish. Marcus stood at the podium, barely tall enough to see over it. His notebook shook slightly in his hands, but his voice was steady. He began by recounting his mother's work schedule, explaining how she had been clocked in at her job on the very evening the landlord accused her of storming his office. He held up copies of her time card, which he had carefully requested from her workplace days earlier, sensing it might matter. The jurors leaned forward, their expressions shifting. The prosecutor objected, his voice sharp with disbelief, but the judge silenced him with a raised hand. The boy's reasoning was too precise to dismiss outright. Marcus pressed on, pointing out contradictions in the landlord's statements, the way his testimony changed subtly under questioning. He highlighted small details, how the landlord claimed broken glass had been swept up before police arrived, yet photographs showed shards still scattered across the floor. Each fact Marcus delivered landed like a blow, dismantling the carefully constructed image of Angela as guilty. The jurors no longer looked convinced of her guilt, now they looked uneasy, glancing at one another with doubt. The judge's eyes, once skeptical, softened into something resembling admiration. Never in his years on the bench had he seen a child command such presence, armed not with emotion alone, but with truth and logic. By the time Marcus finished, the courtroom was transformed. The prosecutor's argument seemed brittle, the landlord's credibility in tatters. Angela sat straighter in her chair, her tears now mixed with pride. For once, the truth had cut through prejudice and justice had found its way. But the impact went beyond that single case. Word of the boy's defense spread quickly through town, newspapers dubbing him the child lawyer. Some dismissed it as a spectacle, others called it a miracle. Yet for many in the community, especially other black families, it became a symbol of hope. If an 8-year-old could stand up to the system and win, maybe change was possible after all. The landlord, humiliated and exposed, retreated from public view. His influence, once unquestioned, crumbled under the weight of his lies. The prosecutor faced sharp criticism for his role in pursuing a weak, racially charged case. As for Marcus, he returned to his books, not for fame, but because knowledge was his armor. His mother continued working, but with renewed strength, knowing she had raised a son who understood both the pain of injustice and the power of truth. The story lingered long after the courtroom emptied. People began asking hard questions about why Angela had been targeted in the first place, and how many others had been silenced without a child brave enough to speak up. And that's the question that remains with us today. How many lives are crushed quietly by injustice, their stories never told? Marcus's courage forced a reckoning, but it also left us with a challenge. When faced with prejudice, when the system tilts against the vulnerable, will we stay silent? Or will we, like an 8-year-old boy in a Southern courtroom, dare to speak truth to power?